So good morning, everyone. So I thought this morning we would start with a meditation and then carry on from there. So if you'd like to just make yourself comfortable. So I'll say a few things just by way of reminder, more like a sort of just letting these things drop into your mind, and yeah, just by way of reminder of some of the things that we've touched on during the week within the mandala of the faculties. Yeah. So just letting body and mind sit quite naturally, lie quite naturally. You might have your eyes open, might be sitting up with your legs crossed, your arms folded. It's really what feels comfortable and natural right now, and that may change. You may adjust your posture a little during the sit. And this is a practice that we can do anywhere. Awareness can be aware in whatever posture. And I'm just going to, for the next few minutes, just drop in some of the qualities from the mandala of the five spiritual faculties that we've been exploring during the week. And you can just notice if the qualities that I drop in resonate with something already within your own heart, mind, body, mind, or if there's some response that you can just, like a pebble dropping into a pond, you can just be with the ripples, allow the effect. So to whatever extent we're looking to bring the mandala into being, bring it into conscious awareness. Not through thinking about it, just allowing those qualities to whatever degree to live within us. So with the faculty of faith, there was a receptivity, a responsiveness to a sense of something higher. Connecting in with our values. And touching in moments of confidence in ourselves, in our practice. Touching the earth. Calling to witness previous and current moments of kindness, wisdom, and all the other Kalyana, beautiful qualities of mind. And the moments of trusting awareness is enough. Mindfulness and wisdom is enough. Enough to be present, attentive, and curious. Letting the faculty, the quality of faith flourish in whatever way in our minds and hearts. Noticing moments of stability of mind, settledness of body, the faculty of samadhi. That has the proximate cause of happiness and contentment or its arising. We're happy, content to sit, to be present. Appreciating and enjoying that sense of going nowhere, settled in the moment. In contact with the faculty of virya, energy put to the good, energy to further our practice. Perhaps a subtle sense of interest or curiosity that motivates us to stay with what's present now. Rather than taking us off into more second level reality of contents, of thoughts, images. The energy can be subtle, it can be playful. It can be pervasive through the senses. Or it can be specific to being able to follow the direction the attention is going in that moment. Then the wisdom faculty bringing its sense of clearly knowing, bringing an intuitive intelligence. What's happening now? How am I relating to this experience or this one? With some degree of right view, or relating in a more personal way. This object in reference to me or mine. And whichever it is, if there's a recognition, a clear knowing, then we can also know and recognize some degree of wisdom working in the mind. Wisdom always working for the good. Clear seeing always reduces suffering in the mind. Wisdom always has metta as part of that objectivity. And the mindfulness faculty working together with wisdom, working in harmony and balancing the other faculties, aware of each of them within the mind. Each quality coming and going. Each time they arise. The presence of mindfulness means they can be recognized, and that recognition encourages them to flourish, to grow. So we can settle back with that quality of mindful knowing, relaxing into awareness and noticing how that feels. And it may be that you can notice that mindfulness itself comes and goes. At times it spontaneously re-arises. How it comes back in its own time after we've been perhaps lost in a story. Mindfulness is there again. The more we can relax around the comings and goings of awareness, the more you may find that it naturally re-arises. Awareness is there again in the present moment. We can just notice what's happening here and start to get familiar with the flavor of awareness naturally arising. Our effort, our previous rememberings have done the work of establishing some momentum in practice. We've been setting up conditions for mindfulness and for the other faculties to arise more and more frequently, and to arise with less and less prompting. Arising according to their own nature, uncontrived, naturally arising. Awareness of different objects through the senses, and at times being aware of awareness. When we notice the objects of awareness, seeing if it's possible to just touch them very lightly, like a butterfly just landing on one leaf after another. Very delicate, subtle. Like a dance of knowing, a symphony of awareness. We can start to see how often the awareness re-arises, how often we're present in the moment in a way that's completely effortless. Just happening by itself. Nobody doing it. And perhaps what also arises is a sense of appreciating awareness, appreciating the mind. So the meditation teacher, Andrea Feller, says, there are so many experiences, so many objects that we have no idea about. We have no possibility of imagining their reality or their formation. We just have no idea. And if we are always choosing where our attention goes, we will limit what we're able to be aware of. At some point, we have to let go of the control of where our attention is, to allow the mind to begin to explore terrain that is unknown to it, that we have no idea about. We are not going to find our way to nirvana. We have no idea what we're looking for. We have to have the ability to allow the mind to explore something that we don't know. So watch where the mind wants to go. Sometimes it can be, wow, I have no idea what's going on here, but I know I'm aware. You could not possibly even name the object because it's so unfamiliar, but you know that you're aware. And you just hang out there, knowing that. So we have a bit of time if there's anyone, again, perhaps someone who's not spoken before in this, this way of, not spoken so far about their own practice. Blah. Yeah, anything that just perhaps caught your interest or even sort of slightly surprised you, one of those moments in practice, in presence. don't know if it was just me, but that particular practice felt quite sort of settled and quite still, something of a coming together. Yeah, so it's not always easy to speak after that, so of course don't feel that you have to, but if there's something that would like to be expressed, then please do. Rachel.
The reading at the end was very apt for me, because in moments of awareness, I realised that things passing through in a way that I had no idea what it was, and somehow that the reading at the end gave permission for that to kind of just allow it, and at some point maybe I would understand what it was.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's I love that reading for that reason. It's so easy to subtly discount something if it's a bit unclear, or we just doesn't quite fit into our unconscious sort of schema. So yeah, lovely. It's like you say, it gives permission to, oh, there's this, and it doesn't have to be known by the conceptual mind, but awareness can know it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Soraya's asking, so it's Andrea Feller, who both Mokshika and I have mentioned. Feller, F-E-L-L-A, and she's a Dharma teacher teaching out of, I think, San Diego with Gil Fronsdal. Okay, Rachel.
Yes, I'll unmute myself this time. Yeah, I was wondering if you could say something maybe about fear, actually, working with fear, because I was finding that actually in this last meditation, a bit of sort of fear resistance, and yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you said fear, and almost in the same breath you said resistance. Could you say anything more about that? Because there is a connection, I think, between the two.
So I've been noticing lately, at various times in the past few days, quite a bit of resistance, just ready to get up and done meditating, which is unusual for me. Yes, and then today I just really it was quite clearly noticed fear. So, and it felt connected to me somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think with maybe any sort of resistance, there needs to be there's quite a lot of gentleness, quite a lot of spaciousness around, and a real attentiveness to not pushing, not forcing, but also it is maybe that the sampajanya quality. It's like, well, is there a way of being with this experience? Would a change of posture, for example, mean that there was more ease with the resistance? So sometimes moving, so sometimes, like you say, there's a strong feeling to get up, and it may well be that, say, walking meditation, it just enables us to be with what's happening in a way that's what supports the awareness of it. Yeah,
in fact, I did that yesterday. At one point I was just getting up and moving around, and
and did that make a difference, a positive difference?
Yeah, I felt like I was with it a bit less, but maybe that's what was needed. I don't know, but I was still with it. But.
Yeah. So that feeling of being with it, I think we could say that the awareness is more able to be with the experience, even something that's can be quite uncomfortable, like resistance or not wanting. Yeah, so with the fear, I mean, what traditionally the connection is, the fear is connected with aversion. It's like a secondary sort of aversion. So, but it is something that can arise for a number of reasons. It may simply be that yeah, there's something unknown, something unknown in the periphery of our awareness, so perhaps a new experience. So it might be something like that, or it might be something more sort of conditioned from our past that's making itself known once body and mind have calmed down a little bit and there's a bit more awareness. So I think fear is also always something to be known clearly, to be recognized in awareness. Perhaps in an especially sort of gentle way, in a very respectful way, but it's something that's quite easy for us to be identified with. My fear, or I'm afraid. Oh, that must mean something terrible, or whatever. There's a lot of stories we can have around fear, and that means that we stop. We make it a special case. We make a nest of it, in Analio's words. We make a nest. It's something important. Therefore, we stop treating it like any other object. So, oh, okay, here it is. It can be noticed like anything else. I can notice the tendency maybe to make a story out of it or around it, or it must be about this, or and that there may be, some validity in those stories, but it's this sense of yeah, as I said, balancing, being a respectful awareness with perhaps noticing any tendency to make a nest. And just see what happens. Hold it as best you can in the most supportive way.
Very helpful, thank you.
Anyone else? Vajradevi? Okay, I can see Matthew with his hand. So if there isn't anybody else, Matthew, would you like to unmute?
There was a lot of struggle for the majority of the time, yeah. But then there was a rather sudden, pleasant transition period, which is still there, where the sati came through like a fish jumping out of the water. Yeah, the torrents of the mind relative to the physical things that was happening in the body, that there was a cessation of that, and it wasn't gradual. It was like that. This whoa came through, and I didn't want to move. Just wanted, and I was doing the mindfulness of breathing through that, yeah, because I wanted to develop sati, that whoa, yeah, that mind that's calm, and there was a calmness came through, which had not been there during this. That has been there before, but not during this particular period of practice. Yeah, and it's beautiful. I've got no questions to ask about it.
No, that's fine.
I'm making statements. I know you know how to take a Dharma question, but it just surprised me that, wow, this is still possible.
Great. Yeah.
So you showed the faith aspect.
Yeah.
In practice, faith in practice.
Yeah. Great.
Faith that sati is good all the way. So I humbly switch off my microphone. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew. Okay, so let's have a little break, maybe until 25 to 12, and then some of you have sent me some questions, or Vajradevi some questions, which is great. But there should also be space if there's anybody who wants to ask a question in this period after the break, or put something in the chat. Okay, is that a question, Vicky? Is that something you'd like?
It is actually, yes. It's something I've been thinking about for the past couple of days, and it always seems to me that we do attach more to something negative than something positive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll add that to my little list. But in the meantime, you can all go and get some tea. Okay, we're having a bit of frozen screen problem here. Mine looks okay. Vajradevi, how's yours looking? Oh, I'm not plugged in. Oops.
Everything looks and sounds fine from here.
Excellent. Good. It's just a momentary arising. Good. Okay, Vajradevi is just going to say something, and then we'll come back to me and possibly Moksha if you have questions for Moksha. And just to say, there are a fantastic number of questions and lovely, interesting questions, and I'm aware that I'm not going to be able to get to them all. There will not be time for them all. But what I might do is put a Q&A thing, either send it around by email just with thoughts on the different questions, or put it up on the blog and perhaps a link, perhaps also, or perhaps do both. But just to say one way or another, they'll get some sort of response, but not necessarily in the next half hour. Yeah, Vajradevi, over to you.
Yes, I wanted to say a couple of things. One is about the groups this afternoon. So it's the same as whenever it was all that time way back when we had our first groups. If you'd like to come to a check-in final reporting in group, then please log in at 4:45 UK time. And then the groups themselves will split off at 4 p.m. And it's this same Zoom link. It's not your review Zoom link. It's this main Zoom link for that. If you didn't come to a group on the first one that we had, then you're still welcome to come this time around, and I'll allocate you to a group. I hope that's clear. Great opportunity just to again tune in a slightly more intimate surrounding of whatever, sort of 8 or 10 people. And the second thing I wanted to say is to do with all the resources that are up on the Padlet now. They won't stay there indefinitely. I'll take them down in a couple of weeks. So if there are particular readings or pujas or whatever you want to download, then please just go to the Padlet and copy them and put them somewhere that you want to keep them. I think that's it from me.
Okay. Where to start? Okay, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions that came in this morning. Sorry, they've all come in this morning. That came in by email before the session, this first session. I won't say who the questions are from. You'll know your own question, but just to just in case. Most of them are not particularly personal, but but occasionally they are a bit more personal. So this question is, if it's possible, could I sum up in, say, 3 main points what you'd like us to take away from the retreat to help us deepen our practice of mindfulness? Okay, so yeah, had different groupings of 3 points. So these 3 main points, and then there were these other 3 main points, and yeah. So what I came up with in the end was the importance of recognizing that we can be aware of anything, anytime, that awareness is always available, if we remember. So there's that we can always, in a way, this is more than 1 point already, but yeah, so we can be aware of anything and awareness is always available. And that part of the same point, that mindfulness has an effect on the quality of the mind. The second of the 3 things is to remember to settle back, to remember that, if you like, the quality of effort, the quality of energy. So settle back, relax into awareness. It's a very simple idea, but I think it has quite a big effect. Relax into the present moment, relax into awareness. And then the third thing is right view. So how am I relating to experience? Just checking in with ourselves on that. And there not being a right answer to this, but it's like checking to see where we're coming from, see how the mind is relating to what's happening outside of itself or within itself. Is it relating to what's happening with this quite strong personal sense? Or is there a little bit more, the lessening of that subjectivity, more objectivity? Yeah, this is what's happening. So right view is always encouraging us to view experience. It's like training in training that Dharma lens, that wisdom perspective, and strengthening that. And so with that's from this practice, but it's, of course, we have a lot of Dharma teaching, a lot of Dharma understanding in the mind already. So it's really just accessing that on a moment-to-moment basis in terms of yeah, how we relate. What's the lens through which we are seeing what's happening? Yeah, so can be aware of anything, settling back and remembering right view. And actually, I might go on just to talk about that, because there was a question about formless practice, or this type of practice in relation to ordination training, in a way where it fits in. So I just wanted to say a few things. So what Bhante said about watching the mind is always useful, always referencing back to awareness, referencing back to the importance of mindfulness, and particularly in daily practice. What is the mind knowing in this communication? What is the mind knowing sitting down to eat, answering an email? What's the attitude in the mind towards what's happening? So all those sorts of daily life mindfulness, yeah, completely helpful. Again, the spiritual receptivity aspects in relation to the quality of energy, quality of effort used. Settling back, seeing when we just put in more effort than is needed. So within the ordination training, I think on both the men and the women's side, there's a lot of emphasis, certainly at the retreat center end of it, on study and really understanding Dharma concepts, which can help us a lot in relation to this more sort of moment by moment way of looking at right view. Yeah, and maybe just one more thing to say in terms of ordination training. It's important, as in all practice, to have this element of just sitting. And while this Satipatthana practice is more of a sort of just sitting with bells on, is sometimes how I describe it. In essence, there's a need within quite a lot of emphasis on activity and on conceptual understanding, really being clear about a Dharma understanding. Yeah, to also have that element of formlessness or just sitting in our practice. Vajradevi is waving at me, so I'm just going to check out something. Yeah.
This is a bit of a hot off the press thing for people training for ordination, because the public preceptors have just released a new series of guidelines. We've now got 8 guidelines, and the one which used to be, have I got an effective meditation practice, now also says, how do I work with my mind inside and outside meditation, including the cultivation of mindfulness and metta? How do I effectively identify and transform afflictive emotions and thoughts? Which all seems quite kind of congruent with this form of practice. So I just thought I'd chuck that in.
Thank you. That's great. I haven't come across that. Hot off the press. Good. Okay. So there was another question, something I talked about a few days ago when I talked about awareness being impartial, while also having some understanding of what does or does not lead to suffering. So that would be sati working with samprajanya. So sati, mindfulness and clear knowing or clearly comprehending. And the question goes, if you allow what's arising to arise. Oh no, this is what I said, sorry. If you allow what's arising to arise, at some point when there's enough awareness will say, you don't need to go there. So the question is, can awareness lead to skillful mental states spontaneously without going through a choosing process? So this is actually a very big question, because it brings in the whole area of choosing and deciding, of volition. It brings in the whole area of volition, and whether and to what extent we ever choose or decide. And if you like, if what we're working, if what we take to be me, myself, who is choosing or deciding, if, as the Buddha says, there's a big question mark over that, then what is choosing, who is deciding? So there are different models, I think, different sort of models of mind within the Buddhist tradition. And so the one I've been working with for a long time, and we've been working with, is, if you like, and actually Subhuti in his book Mind in Harmony and Bhante in Know Your Mind also work with. So it's a model of different mental factors, and volition or intention, that sort of move to action, sanskaras, mental formations, whichever word we use, we mostly act through our habitual behavior. So what we think of as our choices are often more inevitable than we might think, because they're on the basis of certain mental factors that are working in the mind and have been working, in different sort of formations. They line up in different sort of faculties in the mind, in the moment. I'll just try and say that again, because I think that wasn't very clear. So we have, on the whole, we have energy behind our habits. We have volitional energy behind habits. We also have the present moment, and to the extent that we can be aware in the present moment, then we can influence what happens. We can have some influence on those habits. It's often what's talked about as the point of choice, or the gap. It's just a slightly different way of putting it. I almost see it as you've got these little sort of characters that are there in any given moment. You've got the character of little greed manifesting in the moment, or you've got little frustration or little aversion, and you've got lots and lots of them, or you've got a certain degree of calm. And like with the spiritual faculties, in a way, mindfulness, if it's present, has some sort of a sense of what's happening, and that is quite influential in the present moment. So to relate this to the question, if you like, can awareness lead to skillful mental states spontaneously without going through a choosing process? Well, the skillful mental states, awareness is one factor in that present moment, and it has some influence, but it also depends quite a lot on those habitual historical mental factors. Which other ones are there? So if there's quite a lot of, maybe you've been meditating for a while, or there's you're in quite a positive mental state, there'll be a lot of positive factors in the mind, skillful factors, including awareness, which in itself is a skillful factor. So actually, awareness can lead to the encouraging and the prioritizing, if you like, of those more skillful factors in the mind, in the moment, which will, in a way, just take the mind more in a skillful direction, without going through a sort of conceptual choosing process, as it were. But because it's just that the orientation of your being, the orientation through those preponderance of positive mental factors is influencing the mind in that moment, influencing whatever decision is made. This is a really, really big area, and I'm just saying a little bit. There's a lot we could explore around intention, and on a longer retreat, and particularly probably an in-person retreat, it's easier to really explore intention. Someone not a million miles away from me has this little saying, we have control over nothing and influence over everything. And for me, this really speaks to this area around choosing, around deciding. The more awareness we have, and the more of the different qualities, beautiful qualities of mind, the spiritual faculties, in a way, the more choice we have, the more influence we have over a direction that's in line with our values. Okay, I'll leave that there. Okay, so one other question from earlier this morning, and that's to do with talking and listening, listening to someone else talk in awareness. When I go on retreat with Utejaniya, he does something, he does less of it these days, but something called talking meditation, where he encourages us to talk and listen to each other, usually in pairs or in small groups, and to take awareness through. So to practice being aware while speaking and while listening, and to notice what happens. He does it less than he used to, and I think that's because he understands that it's more difficult for people than he perhaps initially thought. And he's coming from a tradition where, on the whole, people don't speak on retreats. They're silent Vipassana retreats. So his thing is, well, if you never talk, if you never speak or practice speaking and listening with awareness on retreat, then you go home and you just fall into your usual patterns. You fall into habitual ways of speaking, usually with very little awareness. And I think in Triratna, where we have a strong culture of ethics, a strong culture of using the speech precepts in our practice. So what we're doing in addition to that is just taking awareness of the sounds, awareness of the feelings, the sensations, the whole process that's involved with while I'm talking and while I'm listening. So one thing is to really notice the tendency not to settle back in conversation. We want the other person to know we're interested. We want them to see they have our attention, and our interest and our eagerness can sometimes take us forward, take us a leaning in, rather than settling back so that we can continue to notice what's going on in our own body and mind. It's very easy to sort of lose that. So we can do it in various ways. We can practice in various ways. I think sometimes we can do it in just set up a sort of communication exercise. I've done this on retreat, led people through. It's really helpful if you're talking about the Dharma or if you're talking about awareness, because that, in a sense, the content of what you're talking about primes the mind to be aware, primes the mind to have some sort of Dharma perspective within it. So if there's somebody you know, perhaps if you have a willing partner, even over Zoom, you could practice just taking awareness through speaking and listening. Another way of doing it is to, if you are not doing it with a partner, but perhaps you're just chatting with someone in maybe over lunch. So it's not a full-on intense conversation, where we tend to get lost in the concepts. The ideas tend to take over, wrap themselves around with lots of feelings, and awareness becomes a bit of a, well, I don't know what, it's not really there. So some periods of time when the conversation's a little bit intermittent can leave you with enough space in between. Was I aware? Sort of re-establish being aware of talking or listening. I think one thing is not to be afraid of silence and gaps in conversation. I think when I started talking meditation, I realized how in certain situations I was uncomfortable with the silence. I was just uncomfortable with the gaps, and that often the motivation for me speaking was to relieve that discomfort. It was quite a slight discomfort, but to relieve it in some way. And there were ideas in the mind as well that I recognized. Maybe there's something not quite right in this relationship. This that we're not really talking very much. So there were some ideas that became revealed, if you like, through that emphasis, through watching the mind during periods of talking and periods of silence. So again, there's quite a lot more that could be said, but perhaps particularly, okay, I've just seen there's some more guidance around actually about this. I think through people like Gregory Kramer, I think it is, who and just seen a note about active listening. So I think Gregory Kramer has a number of different principles that you can bear in mind through speaking and listening. Okay. So there was a question about using the language of objects. Yeah, and whether that had any pitfalls. And I think it can have. Thank you. Yeah, so the aim is, if you like, as I'm not sure if we've had this reading, but if you like, it's to, Bhante talks about something becomes an object in the mind, and it's sort of released from our subjectivity, our subjective relationship to it. It becomes, if you like, a happening on its own terms, if you like, rather than in relation to me and mine. So the question was around, could it lead to objectifying things? And I think it can. I think that something that can be helpful to guard against that is to perhaps just use different words. So as well as objects, if you find objects a bit sort of distancing or objectifying, then just switch to happenings, arisings, something like that. I find both of those, they're quite sort of fluid words. They're happenings in the mind, arisings in the mind or the body, things being known. So yeah, just play around and see what your relationship is to that particular way of framing experience. I definitely think it has it's strongly helpful, and yet you can find it sort of, if it goes more towards that sort of objectifying or distancing, just watch out for that. Maybe there's time for one more before we stop. Oh yeah, something, I think there were a couple of questions actually about the relationship between this practice and dhyana or jhana, as in Pali. So I have been hearing from one or two people who have said that they found themselves spontaneously entering jhana or first jhana in the practice. And what's that about? Is that where it's going, or is that not where it's going? So generally it's not where it's going. But if your mind goes there, if you find that actually the spaciousness and this quite open awareness. For some people, that is a way that's really conducive to the mind settling and naturally unifying. In some ways, it's more conducive than if they start with trying to unify around the breath in the first place. So be aware of what your mind does. In a sense, I don't know how to describe this sort of shape, but it's a bit like you've got these two different ways of settling the mind, of working with calming the mind through different ways of working in relation to the hindrances. And at a certain point, perhaps you've got a similar a state of mind that's quite calm, that's quite open. Maybe one side is a bit more unified than the other, but you've got a place where again you have a choice, and you've got a mind that could quite easily go towards dhyana. It could quite easily settle around one particular object, or it can open up further. That's the other option. It can open up further and stay with this particular approach, which is at this point more of an insight practice. So with the dhyana route, it's also it's in insight territory, but you might explore the higher dhyanas and then come to a lower dhyana in which to be able to use it as an insight practice. So I hope that's clear. So you can go there, but it's not the main aim of the practice. As that little saying from the Satipatthana Sutta, which was the one about clearly knowing, and it was about, I can't remember it. Do you remember it? Is that the degree of mindfulness being enough to have this sort of continuity of attention? Yeah. So you're not looking for such a high degree of concentration. Yeah, and I think that's probably enough. Otherwise, they will start blurring into one, don't they? But the questions I haven't been able to get to, I'll either reply personally or put them onto an email and send them to you. Okay, so a little bit of a change of gear, but let's just take a moment. Actually, you've been hearing me speak. You've been listening, and as I say, it's not easy. It's not easy. That thank you, mindful to the extent necessary for clear mindfulness and continual knowing. Talking meditation is quite tricky. Being able to hear without too much sort of focusing and without using too much energy. I think those are a couple of the things that trip us up. We get quite narrowly focused and we use loads of energy, either in speaking or in listening. So in recognition that may well have happened, let's take just a pause for a couple of minutes. Oh. Okay. So we are going to end the morning with another sitting, an unled sit, and I'll read something in relation to that. But before that, I just want to say a few words in relation to dana. So firstly, I want to thank those of you, and quite a number of you, who've already given. You've already given to me. You've made a donation. Thank you very, very, very much. My support comes entirely through dana, and I feel incredibly privileged that that's the case. It's quite a recent thing, just in the last 2 or 3 years, really, and that was partly made possible by friends donating on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. So that's the sort of part of my support, and the rest has come through the teaching that I do, which until this year was mainly at retreat centres, and now of course it's not, but sometimes it's still for retreat centres. Yeah, so we deliberately, well, I deliberately didn't want to put a set amount that we were asking for the retreat, but just to leave it up to you what you're able to give, what your circumstances allow you to give, and if you like, there's a certain mutual, yeah, what I offer, what the team offers is freely given. That's a lovely phrase. And so therefore what's asked of you is that you freely give as little or as much as you would like to. Yeah, just maybe one extra thing to say, which I think it says on the blurb, is that some of the retreat centres are in a really difficult position. And what I said at the last retreat, and I'm saying it again, is some of the people who teach regularly, including myself at retreat centres, we've been asked if we need to take dana or some sort of fee for our teaching this year. And I really wanted to be in the position to say, no, I'm okay. And so having these retreats where a lot of you come enables me, well, has enabled me to do that to some extent at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. So yeah, that's also, if you like, your dana not only helps me, but it helps our retreat centres too, indirectly. So thank you. Oh, and yeah, if you haven't seen it, there's some details of how to give on the main page of information, retreat information. If you scroll down there, there's some details. Okay, so let's, as I said, we'll end the morning with a short sit. We've got about 15 minutes to just sit. And I'll read something before we start by Thich Nhat Hanh. So when I say just sit, I think there's been a little bit of confusion about what's the difference between just sitting and the practice we've been doing. So it's really, you just sit and notice what you notice. I think I've largely been making a distinction between led sits and unled sits. But really a just sitting is an opportunity to just sit, to have that present moment awareness, and to be able to notice what's happening in the mind through the senses. So Thich Nhat Hanh, a river of perceptions. Our thoughts and feelings are like a river. If we try to stop the flow of a river, we will meet the resistance of the water. It is best to flow with it, and then we may be able to guide it in the ways we want it to go. We must not attempt to halt it. Keep in mind that the river must flow and that we are going to follow it. We can be aware of every little stream that joins it. We can be aware of all the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise in us, of their birth, duration, and disappearance. Do you see? Now the resistance begins to disappear. The river of perceptions is still flowing, but no longer in darkness. It is now flowing in the sunlight of awareness. To keep this sun always shining inside of us, illuminating each rivulet, each pebble, each bend in the river, is the practice of meditation.